Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, Editor-in-Chief, and today we are covering employee retention. Big, I know, but we have an industry expert here who's going to answer all the hard questions for us today. Today's special guest is Chris Buttenham. He is the founder of REINS. He has been in technology and software for over 10 years, and he is dedicated to helping contractors retain their best employees. So please welcome Chris.
Thank you so much, Kayla.
Yes, thank you for joining me. I'm really excited to kind of dive into this. It's an industry pain point, and more importantly, I think it's just a pain point for everybody right now. I feel like since COVID, we've all kind of struggled. So thank you for saying you tackle this tough topic.
For sure.
And I'm ready to hear all of your answers. I know there's a lot of questions that people have, so let's just dive right in.
All right.
What do you believe are the biggest reasons that the industry struggles with employee retention, and what strategies have you seen that are effective in addressing this issue?
Yeah, I think in restoration, the trades, blue collar industries, the talent shortage is a huge culprit for that, right? Kind of a supply and demand imbalance where there are a lot fewer employees than there are, roles available, and so it creates leverage, quite frankly, on their end. Um, so I think that's a big reason. And, I think uh, most companies, most industries struggle with this, but I also think in the blue collar industry, at least historically, owners have put culture and um, thinking about how to motivate and incentivize employees kind of on the back burner. And so I think for these reasons, that's why it's a challenge in this industry. I think then inversely, the solution, at least the solutions that we focus on, well, so we focus on kind of alternative equity incentives for key employees in blue collar industries. But this answer may be a little surprising. I think more important than that is culture. And so making sure, you have a leader that is transparent, clearly setting a um, mission, vision for the business, uh, articulating and codifying values that employees can live by, you know, throughout their day to day, I think is actually way more important than anything else you can do. And it's actually probably the hardest thing to do. Um, and not exactly obvious on its ROI, but from what I've seen, in both running companies that I've had and working with, hundreds of contractors, the ones that are most successful have the culture piece dialed in.
Yeah, I think culture is becoming a bigger topic in this space. And we have to remember culture is extremely important because we spend most of our time at work. And
Right.
if the culture just isn't there, that's why people leave because they have to make a decision sometimes in life. And it's like a hard one. It's not always the easy one, right? You're not just paying the bills, but you need to love what you do and
Yep.
feel like a family, right? I think that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So I think you hit that right head on, and if you aren't doing this, focus on your culture, people. This is
Hmm.
extremely important, especially with the younger generations as well. I think that, who have been in the industry for quite some time, culture is a big part of who they are. But also, some people are just used to what's been the status quo for the last 20 years. But the younger generation really needs that culture. And let's face it, we need the younger generation involved in our day to day. And so culture is one of the biggest pain but winning points that we could potentially focus on.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, communication is a huge thing too, which does feed into your culture, believe it or not. So, how do you grow and nurture open communication and honestly career transparency within your team? And how do these efforts impact employee engagement and turnover rates?
Yeah, I think it all stems from transparency. Um, Owners and a culture that enables transparency is one that is clearly communicated with employees. um, having a clear map, a clear career progression for employees is really helpful to show them what they need to do in order to get to the next step. Um, and honestly, aligning financial incentives with the goals of the business actually creates clear communication, because what happens is things get broken down. The owner says, well, we need to make more money, or we need to, maintain a net profit margin. Well, if you're not clearly communicating why, how, and incentivizing folks to rally around those goals, then they're they have no incentive to do that, and they don't really have the clarity and the why in order to do that, which can also tie back into culture as well. But I far too often see um, you know these budgets that don't have a direct line to employee incentives, and and then there's no wonder why the company's not hitting its goals.
Exactly. And I think we as humans just function on who, what, when, where, why, and how. And so this is no different in your day-to-day business, especially building culture, keeping your team in the loop. And just be transparent, like you said. I mean, honestly, I know usually strategic planning is for your higher upper management, but involve your technicians, involve your administrative team so they're just aware,
Exactly.
right? So then if they know what goals you're working towards, it makes it easier for them to understand, but also have a little bit more push in specific goals to help with the strategy. So with that being said, talking about strategy, can you share a successful strategy or initiative that your company has implemented to increase employee satisfaction and long-term commitment?
Yeah, well, going back to kind of answer that question and tie a bow on the last one, for a lot of the contractors that I talk to, particularly the ones in some of the coaching groups, they employ these practices like the daily huddle, or weekly meetings, quarterly syncs, and these things are a great vehicle to communicate those, whether it's the budget and the why, and how they actually draw a straight line to the goals, and how the company collectively is going to hit it. So I just wanted to say that, and that's something I do in my own company. We have a daily stand up. We have weekly, we call it sprint planning, where we're essentially just planning for the week. Um, the biggest thing, and this is not something, I'm sure the blue collar industry has its own flavor of it, but definitely there's no reason it can't be co-opted, is we use a framework called OKRs, which is objectives and key results. And essentially it's just a way of modeling out your goals, quanti- in a very quantitative way. And so we do that quarterly, but we meet on those OKRs monthly. And so that's really our compass, and it aligns us on sort of bigger beachheads, bigger rocks that we're trying to move throughout the year. So that is some of the things we've done. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about incentives. So all of my employees have equity. So be it that we are a technology startup, we are a corporation, and the reason I'm telling you that is we offer our employees stock options. But for a lot of these contractors, they're often LLCs, and so what we've done at REINS is we've made it really simple for those contractors to offer alternative equity solutions to their employees. So giving them some skin in the game, tied to the company goals, and maybe even a share of the profits, should those performance conditions be met. And so those are definitely some things that I've employed personally, and then have worked with hundreds of other contractors on to increase the engagement and long term commitment of their employees.
I think that's really key, right? Because there's additional buy-in, like you said, skin in the game. And it just makes those strategic goals or the OKRs, is that what you've called them?
Yep.
Um, more important.
Yep.
It's driven by strategy, but also the outcome, right? If you have something to gain or lose, just as humans, we're going to make sure that we put maximum effort, thought, ask questions, and allow us to pivot. Because I think sometimes when we talk about strategy, or strategic goals, sometimes it's like, oh, well, that's a strategy we can't change and pivot, but you can. And so I think that's key, not only to look at things quarterly, but even monthly and weekly sometimes, depending on
Yeah,
what the initiatives are. And I think we all thrive off of incentives, let's be honest, whether it's a specific type of PTO, or maybe you have discounts, or maybe if you're based on the sales, right? There's all these different things, but I think with stock options and things like that, it's a little different, a little bit more buy-in, right? So you also help the company be successful in that way. Just, I think your feelings are a little bit more invested. And so that's a great call on your guys' behalf because again, if you gain, you all gain. If you lose, everybody
exactly.
loses and nobody wants to lose, right?
Yeah.
So if a company is struggling with high turnover, which I think a lot of people are at this time, what immediate steps would you recommend that they take to start improving their retention?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, there's not a ton of quick fixes here, right? I think not to beat a dead horse, I think you gotta look at yourself in the mirror and take a look at the culture. I think you can interview, do exit interviews with employees, right? And try and get to the bottom of what's happening and why. Um, and I do think that a relatively accessible and fast thing you can do though is you can start building an incentive program, both short and long term, around retaining those employees. And it can kind of stop the bleeding in a sense because um, probably prior to this, you haven't been doing anything of that nature outside of sort of discretionary bonus or commissions. And so this kind of puts your money where your mouth is as an owner and shows them that not only do you want that long-term commitment, but you are compensating them for that. And to go back to our previous point, that's kind of the merits of equity in general is it incentivizes long-term thinking. It incentivizes actually a little bit more risk taking, and um, and that's what you're trying to do when you're trying to retain those strategic key employees for the long haul.
I would definitely say that there is not really a quick fix, but if you don't already have a plan for incentivization or just your culture in
Right.
general, that's a great way to start. And even if it's not something that you can roll out right away, it's something that you can talk to your staff about, right? Like give
Yeah.
them the opportunity to give that buy-in so that they know that you're turning a new leaf for the staff, right? And oftentimes, like you said, you have to self-reflect. Like wear that hard hat of if I were employed here as an admin or tech, would I be happy with the culture? Would I be happy with the incentives? Would I be happy with insurance, right? I think there's so many things that our employees wait these days. You kind of have to take off your owner operator hat and kind of sit down and take a second and say, okay, if I were coming into this brand new as a technician or admin or PM or whatever the case may be, is this enough? Is this enough for me to stay? I also think that
Right.
career longevity has a lot to do with it as well, which does feed into your culture. It just takes time, but if you know you're missing it, now's the time to start. Um, and to be quite frank, a lot of the industry is focusing on culture. So if you're not, you kind of gotta
Right.
get on that culture train, right? That's the
Exactly.
easiest way to say it. Um, Man, I'm trying to think of any other questions that I've recently heard, just in the events that I've been in recently. And I think pain points are really just employment. How do you find the right, type of staff for your business that ultimately become your family? I think that's a really big struggle right now from, not calling back or they get an interview scheduled, they just don't show up. I mean, how do you find the right candidates?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't think I have a silver bullet for this. Even in my industry, it's especially tough in blue collar industries. But again, one thing you can do is just set yourself apart, right? I think your culture can shine through in a job description if it's thoughtful. I've actually seen that um, work for my own company in relation to a boilerplate, you know, um, type of job listing. And then, again, how do you differentiate in this market? Well, what if you could give unique incentives that no one else is giving? Like you said, if a lot of people are focusing on culture now because they've realized they had to, and I think your point about um, sort of millennials being the new generation who's taking over, it's just the reality, whether we like it or not. And I'm hearing contractors they they accept this fate now. So they're working on that. So now that is the baseline. So same thing goes for incentives. You can't just like pay someone else another $4 an hour or another $10,000 a year. Like you're just inflationary. That's not going to retain them. It's very fleeting. But to give them and to set yourself apart as an organization that says, hey, we invest in our people for the long haul, those incentives are really going to be something that can help you stand out in a really competitive job market.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like providing a career path
Yeah.
also does help longevity. And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, in our space, we're hiring because we need help. But we need to take that time to maybe sit down and say, okay, if somebody comes in at this technician level, or maybe they're the office admin, where can they go from there? That also shows that you have care and buy-in to their success and that you want them to stay with your company, right? And sometimes that even means like, hey, we see you making these two lateral moves, and beyond that, we can kind of see what happens for the company, right? And I think that's also, even though it's not a clear path, it's transparent. It tells them like, hey, we're invested in you and the future of our company, and we want you to be a part of that. Um, I mean, to your point, paying people just more isn't always the option anymore. It used to be way,
Yeah.
maybe a couple years ago where it was like, okay, I'll pay you $4 more. I'll pay you a couple $1,000s more a year. But people just, quite frankly, their mentality has changed a lot. And I think the groups that we're catering to have a different mentality. Like, if I don't like it, I can go somewhere else. And that's a scary mentality to have to kind of navigate, but what can we do on the back end? And I think you've given some great pieces to help people get there. Because let's face it, our industry has been around for a long time, and sometimes we haven't changed things in a timely manner. And like I said, culture is at the forefront, but also I think career path is kind of slowly peeking its head out because people want to know, is this a 1, 2 year commitment, or is this
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to have 20 years? Because I haven't looked recently, and maybe you know the answer to this, but people aren't staying in places for 10 years, 20
No,
years
they're not.
anymore. I think on average it's like 2 or 3 years the last time I looked, which is scary
Yeah.
because that's the lifetime and longevity of your company, right? So for you, I know you've been in the industry for a while, and especially technology and software, and REINS is coming up on 3 years. I'm sure you have employees that you've had from the beginning.
Mhm.
I'm sure you've had people leave and maybe even come back. But for you guys, what does that look like as far as catering to multiple demographics, but also, being optimistic and transparent?
Um, can you ask that in a different way for me?
Yes, of course. So with turnover
Yeah.
being the staple, right, of
Yeah.
2 years or less, you guys are 3 years into this. What are you guys doing to make sure that there's a longevity for your employees?
Got it. Well, certainly incentivizing them like owners because we want them to act like owners. So that's number one. I think, when we talked about culture, I know that sounds esoteric and it may not even be helpful on its face. So to be a little bit more dialed in, this is just my philosophy and what's worked for me and what I've seen some of the more successful leaders I've met do. But you kind of learn that the core values of a company, they're not words on a wall. They are essentially a manifestation of the founders or the owners of the company. And those are kind of immutable characteristics. Um, there's not much you can do about that. But what you can do is you can highlight the positive values that represent those owners or founders of the business. And you can develop what I would call like value statements that are essentially actions, um, so that uh, in practice, people can actually um, live those values. Um, and so I found that to be very effective, and it's actually a compass for hiring because then you're now hiring based on, well, do I think these folks um, not only align with those values, but am I seeing them actually um, live those statements? And so that can, it's just like a compass. It like everyone fits in like a puzzle if you're hiring from that from the get-go. And then as soon as you see a misalignment, then you know it's time to make a change. So I would say that beyond just incentivizing them and obviously clearly communicating, being we're just a very transparent organization, and my employees have told me that's a huge benefit for them. Like there's not a walled garden of things they don't know, and they have attributed that to their tenure.
Yeah, that's huge. And I definitely think to kind of echo what you've said, I think we've both been in different positions throughout our career, and really core values are great, but also to your point, like your morals internally and your thoughts and things need to align with what you do every day for work. I know that's not really talked about either, but you want to have people that are kind of fitting in, like you said, with the puzzle,
Exactly.
right? And so there's not necessarily the right answer or what have you, but you will find the right fit based on your beliefs and your morals and your values, and that will shine through in a place that you work, which I think is crucial to us actually. If we look at what we do every day, we're working 40 plus hours a week. And why would you want to be somewhere where you don't align? That doesn't make any sense. And also, that's not good for the company.
Yeah.
And so that's really key. I think that's really great. I'm happy that you guys are hitting 3 years and the tenure of your staff is great because honestly, that's what this is all about and it'll help you evolve. So I don't have any other questions. I think this is really great. I think you answer some hard questions that people really just don't address, or maybe they're scared to ask. Because some people are scared of the answers and that's okay. Um, I look forward to chatting with you again. So thank you so much for your time and joining in.